I would like you to join me on a journey for the next few minutes because I am going to navigate you through how to excel in challenging conversations and why it's really important that you do. And to do that, I'm going to share a little bit of my journey over the last couple of years, which, if I'm really honest, at times has been filled with some adversity and a few difficult dialogues, but that actually has helped me to craft and create a universal strategy that can positively enhance these conversations for anyone. So I'm going to guess that everybody in this room can think about a difficult conversation that they've had, right? So maybe it's that time of year, maybe it was a challenging performance review. Maybe any conversation that you have with your teenage kids. Maybe an argument with a loved one, or maybe just difficulties and conflict in the teams that you're part of. And the list goes on. Now, these conversations in themselves are unique, but these conversations are really hard. And they're hard, quite simply, because we're human. As a species, we exist in tribes. We need the interaction and the safety of others. And at our core, we don't want anything to upset that balance and harmony of the groups and the systems that we're part of, right? Now, at their worst, difficult conversations can be demoralising and destructive and have devastatingly lasting impacts. But you know, at their best, they can be life-changing and wonderfully transformative. So with a little bit of thought and a little bit of care, these difficult conversations have the potential to empower those that we lead, to foster confidence and resilience in our children, to encourage deeper, richer, more meaningful conversations with the people that we love, and to actually create environments of safe and secure accountability in the teams that we're in and that we collaborate with. So let's, for a minute, jump into a world where people navigate these conversations daily, like doctors who deliver life-changing illness diagnoses. In 2018, I wasn't feeling very well at all, actually. My face had suddenly dropped to one side on a couple of occasions, looking, unfortunately, like I'd had a stroke. I was consistently, chronically tired, and at times I was in a lot of pain. And on the 3rd of June, 2018, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Now, obviously, not a great conversation to be having. These conversations are tough to deliver and tough to hear. But think about it for a minute. Doctors stick to the facts. There's no hyperbole or conjecture. They're empathetic. They're honest. They don't sit on a diagnosis for weeks or months, look at it and think, oh, awkward, and put it to the bottom of their to-do pile, hoping that at some point it might just go away. And they don't literally try and make everything better and just brush it under the carpet, do they? Now, after my diagnosis, I found my job incredibly hard. Probably with the statistic, according to the World Health Organization, that I am now suddenly one of the 1.8 million people globally that suffer from this chronic autoimmune disease. And no one could tell me how it was going to play out, because MS is different for everyone. Now, the thing is, at that point, I knew that my performance then started to suffer. I knew that I wasn't at my best. And I knew that difficult conversations are likely to be coming my way. But what I got was a persistently caustic narrative. People were disappointed in me, and I was no longer good at my job. I, however, vividly remember my turning point, where my anxiety and my fear and my shame flipped into creativity. It was the end of the summer, it was a warm day, and we were having just a regular update meeting in the coffee shop of our open plan office. But repetitive, demoralising conversations had become the norm by that point. So I was so broken, so downtrodden, so mentally defeated, that I just got to the point where I thought, I've got no choice now but just to be honest. Because what I'd never felt safe enough to say was that I was petrified. I had no idea how anything now could possibly go well. And that thought was rippling through every single part of my life and leaving chaos in its wake. And all I needed was for someone to see and to hear that. Now, I really hope that no one goes through what I went through, but I know that for a lot of different reasons, for a lot of different people, they do. Now, at that point, for me, to flip it into creativity and for something to be different, something needed to be different. So I took the scary step of exiting that environment. I completely changed my career. I retrained, and you are now looking at an executive coach. My mission these days is to quite simply help people have better days at work, to help them avoid those experiences that I had. So whether it's having these tough conversations or being on the end of these tough conversations, or just not knowing how to do any of that, it's really, really hard for them. And if I can navigate them through how to be better at that, then that's great, right? Navigating them through means that I can help them get to the point that they wanted to get to. Help them feel more confident when they're having those conversations. And that's the most important thing. So, how do you have these conversations brilliantly, whoever they are with or whatever they're about? So, what I found is, and created, is that there is a 3-step strategy underpinned by 3 things that I need you to remember and be aware of that can help you get through these conversations, help you end up where you intended to get to. So, what is the first of those 3 things that I just need you to remember? So for those of us in the audience that are people pleasers, this is going to really resonate with you, because what I've found in the last 5 years of owning my coaching practice is that people's need to just make it all right and please everybody that are part of those conversations is the thing that can take the power away from the messages that you are trying to land or that you are trying to listen to. It's like pulling at a thread on your favourite jumper, right? You pull at it, and the more that you pull, the further it gets away from you, and you just can't knit it back together again. The second one is knowing and being really aware of the fact that usually in these conversations, there is a game at play. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about something like Monopoly, right? Oh, I'm showing my age there. Fortnite. I'm talking about those subtle, unconscious patterns that we all engage in, but that can really cause us harm to us and to our relationships. So think about that last awkward conversation that you had. Maybe it was the performance review, or maybe it was an argument, whichever one it was. Were you playing a game? Now, I realise that asking you to reflect on that is quite a big thing. Okay, so what I want you to do is think about it. Think about if you had an ulterior motive when you were going into these conversations. Who was the conversation in service of? You or the other person? Now, I realise that actually takes quite a lot of reflection and self-awareness, but let's be honest, I'm on the clock, I've only got 15 minutes. But were you manipulating that conversation to get to an end point that you wanted, that if you've been really honest with yourself, might not have been best? And the third thing that I'm going to ask you to remember is probably the most important, because you have to be comfortable with the inevitable discomfort of these conversations. You have to know that you're not going to be Mary Poppins. It's not all going to go away with a spoonful of sugar, right? But you can get there, and I think this strategy might help you do that. So, step 1 of the strategy. This is a really fundamental step, but I'm sure this will resonate with everybody. You just don't do it. You have to prepare the ground. Okay? Going into any difficult conversation triggers anxiety, primarily fueled by the fear of the unknown, of things that we think might happen. Our brains are wired for self-preservation. So when they're faced with any uncertainty, they're going to plan for the worst-case scenario, with any uncertainty that might be there. So you need to mitigate any unease, okay? And you need to eliminate any ambiguity. So whether you've got a mere 5 minutes or you've got 5 weeks to prepare for this, you just need to make sure that everybody that is part of this conversation is crystal clear. The second step. Now, the second step, I want you to think about always approaching these conversations looking through a helpful lens. Now, to help you do that, I'm going to get you to think about the word help. H-E-L-P. And I'm going to use that as an aid for you to remember it, because this is incredibly important. So H, then. H is for honesty. And when I say that, I mean compassionate honesty. So how honest were you in that last difficult conversation that you had? Because if you were playing a game in any way, you will have found that really hard. But navigating any difficult conversation is a dance. It's a fine art. But honesty can really foster the trust that you need in these conversations. And actually, honesty means that the conversations will now become less of a struggle and more of a transformative dialogue. E is for empathy. Now, Brené Brown, in her book, and in fact TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, insightfully describes empathy as the ability to look someone in the eye and reflect back in our face what they are saying in their words. You may never have experienced the situation that you're talking to them about, but you can show a sincere acknowledgement of their difficulty and a real drive to want to understand. Now, to do that, you have to actively listen. Listening with a real curiosity and a steadfast desire just to understand it is pivotal and fosters these deeply meaningful, rich conversations. L is for logic, underpinned by facts. In these conversations, you have to state the purpose of them and the significance of them for you, for the other person, and for the environment that you're in, be that the business at work that you're in, the relationship that you're in, the family that you're part of. Because by articulating the why in these conversations, it not only provides the context, it creates an essential framework for understanding and for collaboration. And you have to stick to the facts. Now, in these conversations, I know that sometimes that can be elusive, to put a finer point on it. But by sticking to the facts, you eliminate any personal interpretation. By using factual foundations, you prevent any misunderstandings, and you maintain the transparency that you really need. And P is quite simply for promptness. Having these conversations and using the facts means that you have to be able to accurately recall the situations. And that then leads them from a difficult dialogue into a more open and calm discussion. But you have to remember that our memories are subjective, right? They're formed by our experiences, our values, and our beliefs. And gaps appear over time after you've had these conversations. And as the gaps appear, you fill them with those subjective memories. And the more that time goes on, that gap just expands. So avoid any distortion and the false memories and initiate these conversations as soon as you can. Okay, on to step 3 of the strategy. So what needs to happen next? Now, what happens next in these conversations can cement this as a great, difficult conversation. Or that jumper that I mentioned earlier is just starting to unravel even further. You need to have a plan, because coming out of those conversations, what is the immediate next step? Just don't let it drift. Has anybody got any more questions? Do you need to get together again? Schedule a time. Does anybody need some time to reflect? These are hard. Then give them the space. But you need to be absolutely crystal clear on the next steps and the timescales to ensure that you end up where you wanted to get to. And that's it. Not easy, I know, but hopefully I've made that a little bit simpler for you. There really isn't any rocket science. Now, I hope that you can see that conversations that I had to face into could have been so wonderfully different if that strategy had been in place. But would I be standing here on this stage in front of you, having changed my career, if they had been different? I don't know. Sometimes my crystal ball is a little foggy. But what I can tell you is that the journey from there to here would have been a lot less bumpy. So I am going to go now and continue on my mission of ridding the world of these destructive, difficult conversations. And I really hope that now some of you will join me. So go and be great. And although I know that they're difficult, I know that they're hard, what I also know is that you will be okay. Thank you.